Well, Elly, you weren't here last week when James Lindsay had a different philosophy about the culture war is being fought on Twitter, and you need to go after these people.
He's not the only one, you know. I mean, Gad Sad says the same thing, and I felt that at first too. Like,
yeah,
we got to fight
I feel
these
strongly
guys.
about that.
I mean, but then I see how pointless it is. They're not.
Yeah,
you are going after them. You are saying something better than they say, and that is that you're putting a better idea in place of their crappy idea. You know, you go after them by having a better thing to say.
That's right.
Yeah, this is the old debate in politics about whether or not negative campaigning works versus having a positive message.
Mm-hmm.
I think in that space, though, negative campaigning actually does work, but it depends. You know, it may work more on the left, for example, than on the right. But I don't know the answer. You know, I think that somebody needs to challenge the, you know, totalitarians on the left who want to dictate your speech, but at the same time, you know, it's that old debate of getting down in the mud, you get dirty. And I don't think that so there's the problem with it is that you're really speaking to more of a different audience, and the audience you're speaking to already agrees with you. And so if you are trying to persuade somebody online who has these sort of authoritarian kind of ideas around speech, and what do they call when they say speech is violence? It's like there's a name for that. Rick probably knows what I'm talking about.
concept drift.
No, when they say speech is violence, there's a word for that.
Incendiary or inflammatory.
No, it's Michael Rechtenwald came up with a word for that.
Well,
I thought that was really good.
Concept? Explain the idea, and then we'll know what the word was.
Yeah, that discursive violence. That's what it is.
Oh, discursive just means conversational, right?
Yeah, it means that you're saying things that sort of offend them at their core and at their identity, etc. That's like violence, right? And then that sort of goes to where they're not really violating your rights by getting you deplatformed or even throwing milkshakes at your head.
Well, I think the street term for that is fighting words, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but they've stretched it. There has been this concept drift or shift or whatever you want to call it, because even like in my discipline, philosophers will normally just pick a concept and, you know, analyze it and write a piece about it, unpacking it in some insightful way, or, you know, showing some problematic aspect of it. But if they do that, like, I forget the name of the person, but somebody in my field did this about, you know, transgender issue, right? And then like the reaction was that just analyzing the concept as if it's problematic or, you know, whatever is violence. So that's not fighting words, you know, Mark? I mean,
yeah, that's right.
It's just philosophical analysis. It's oriented towards insight and understanding. And, you know, it's at the point where you can't talk about anything. It's like, well, speech is violence as long as it's not woke speech, but silence is violence when there should be woke speech. Those are contradictory.
Right. It's
Speech
all
and
about
silence are both violence.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Welcome to the paradox of wokeness.
Yeah.
So, but where I was going though is that when you, if you're fighting against this ideology and its proponents online, they are not playing on the same playing field as you are. They're not accepting that there is an objective truth and that reason is our means of getting at it, and therefore you know, they're not open to persuasion. And so you're, in a way, it's very counterproductive to try to engage them, because you're speaking a language that at best they will, but they will simply reject out of hand, and at worst they'll say it's just you're just sort of like making a power play of some sort. And so so really, when you're fighting them, your goal then would, right, is the only net benefit would be to persuade onlookers who can see kind of both sides of the debate, the rules by which each side is playing, and the arguments, and then you sort of persuade people on the margins that are in the audience, so to speak.
Yeah, that was sort of the idea, but c'est la vie.
Well, it does work. It means you need to identify exactly who that audience is. You need to.
Well, they make it difficult because they sort of saturate the feed, and it's like you're just getting attacked by rodents, you know, a bunch of rodents. They're coming out of the woodwork. They seem like they're coming out of the woodwork. And when you step on one, there's 50 more coming at you with their little yellow teeth gnashing and your beady black eyes.
The standard tactic.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
I do
Elly.
think that I think silence is actually pretty powerful, though. That if someone needs you to respond and you choose not to, that might feel like it might feel like a cave-in, but I don't think it is. I think you're actually in the position of power there, because I guess it's like, who is controlling the conversation there? Who is deciding what's being said, who's present, and what it's about? Well, if you're being silent, you're the one that's deciding.
Yeah, it's like trolls are a lot like hecklers. Like if you're on stage, you know, being successful in a play or doing a comedy routine or something, they're kind of like the people that hang in the back, you know, screaming and carrying on and trying to basically derail the whole thing, you know. That's kind of what they do.
But there's nothing better than a stand-up comedian who can sling out the perfectly timed heckler put down and just silence that fucker for the whole night, or just make them such a laughing stock that the whole crowd turns against them. I love that. I love when I see that.
That's it. So why does that work though, right? It's because for the heckler, they understand the situation and they know how to be assertive and be in control of what's happening. It's satisfying because they've just cut in and they're not being directed by anyone else, I guess.
When you have a real stand-up comic and somebody's really giving them a hard time and they really rip them in half in real time, what's great about that is that the entire audience reacts immediately. And that's a social control on that heckler. Whereas in social media, the back and forth just keeps going. Like they don't
There's
care.
no restraint. There's
no restraints. They're just going to keep going at you, and they're going to a standard technique that I encountered when I first started expressing my views. When they shifted, I was on the left. You know, I voted for Hillary Clinton, holding my nose against Trump. But that was around the time. Right after that is when I met Mark Gleason, and he's really helped me see things in a different way. You know, because of who he is. Once I started expressing my new views on Facebook, I wasn't on Twitter hardly at all. Mark brought me onto Twitter. He's like, you could better conversations on Twitter. But on Facebook, when I started, I had like 5,000 philosopher friends, you know, people you meet in conferences or whatever. And like a lot of them are just ultra woke. And a lot of them would just, it's like they turned into trolls. What they do is immediately make accusations. This is the pattern that I know. They make accusations, guilt by association, you know, you're alt-right adjacent, you're this, oh, you believe that? Are you implying this? Or what, you don't care? Yeah, well, all that kind of crap. And they just throw it at you. And what happens is you wind up being on the defensive, explaining yourself more often than just expressing your own ideas. And that was something that took me quite a while to realize, all right, this particular guy who I know, who we argue a lot, but like ever since I changed my views, he turned into a troll. I just it took me a while. I kept giving him the benefit of the doubt, and we'd have these private PM things where I'd say, what the hell's going on? Why all of a sudden? And it was just like, he's just a troll. He's just decided that, like James Lindsay, but from on the other side, his job is just to silence and uglify people who have views like mine. That's it. He was like a missile, like a heat-seeking missile. No matter what I said, he was just going to tear it apart and make me look stupid. There was no reasoning with him, even though, another thing was me constantly showing all his fallacies, because it takes fallacies to do that all the time. And I'm very good at identifying them. But even that, they just make believe they don't see it, they don't understand it, or whatever. I finally realized I just have to silence these people. I have to mute them. I have to unfriend them. That was the only way. And now I have almost nobody bothers me on Facebook anymore. But a lot of that similar patterns we've seen in Twitter too. Depends on who it is and what the thread is.
Well, speaking of fallacies, Ayn Rand identified that fallacy as the argument from intimidation, where
that's predominant now.
Yeah, you impeach somebody's character. Okay, I always get these mixed up because I think in Virtue of Selfishness, there are two variants of it that are sort of inverse, but it's something like you impeach somebody's argument by way of their character. In this case, character could be, well, you're what'd you say, alt-right adjacent, you're racist, a tool of the white culture, whatever it is.
You're a straight white dude.
Yeah, so they don't have to argue. They're basically they're bypassing the argument itself, right? And saying, because you're one of these deplorable people who holds these views,
it's a kind of
intolerant, then I don't need to engage you because you're to be othered, and your argument is therefore defeated because you're not worthy of sort of being in polite society, kind of thing, with those views. It's a very nasty trick that is very successful.
Yeah, it's a kind of ad hominem, really.
Yeah.
Ugly.
You're not a credible voice because those views of yours that I just distorted. So it's got an element of straw man in there. Guilt by association. It's a blend. It's a cocktail of fallacies. There's an element of guilt by association. Of course, your views are being misrepresented. And we are saying that because of the kind of character that you are, your arguments are not to be taken seriously. So it's at least those three fallacies blended together.
Yeah. And I think the inverse is saying impeaching your character by way of your argument without actually
engaging the argument. Right.
That's right. Because if you look at the Kafka traps and all that, if you're, by definition, you are guilty of whatever heresy that they accuse you of, then your argument, it's almost like a question begging fallacy, right? Where they're
assume the conclusion that you're wrong first, and then they
That's
just
right.
argue from that backwards to your guilt.
Exactly.
Begging the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's a good segue for the topic at hand, isn't it?
Free speech. Yeah.
Free speech and cancel culture.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, who wants to go first?
I think I would like to talk about where free speech and cancel culture meet. If a person has a view that upsets people, if they have a view that upsets people, what is the actual healthy way that people should respond to that versus cancel culture? What is a healthy alternative to cancel culture, do you think?
Maybe we should define cancel culture first.
Yeah.
Well, but I think cancel culture to me is the idea that there are some, I guess, ideas, thoughts, or beliefs that are not admissible in civilized society, and they should be banned from civilized society. And I do think there are such things, such ideas that are certainly dangerous and shouldn't have political power. But as far as ideas goes, I think an open society is one that entertains all ideas and leaves them all on the table. And the process, the civilized process that you go through to sort of make those ideas irrelevant in the culture is debate. Because once these bad ideas are out there in the marketplace of ideas, they're competing with all kinds of other thoughts, and they usually die because they're so awful, or they become such a fringy movement that they have no power whatsoever. But once you start driving them underground, a perfect example is the cancel culture of communism that started in the 20s. Really, it started in the 20s and persisted through the 50s and 60s in the famous, Red Scares. Well, that was a legitimate political movement that I think was very, very dangerous on a lot of different levels. But what did it do? It drove communism sort of out of the mainstream, out of the light and into the darkness, where they inhabited the institutions, the institutions of learning, institutions that created and passed on information, news, the arts, and they just sort of metastasized there. And we're seeing right now the result of cancel culture in the 50s and 60s, so that this stuff had a chance to germinate in academia, where there was actually no competition. Then they gained institutional power and started deliberately cutting off competition, and now they've monopolized and dominated the discourse today. So cancel culture is something good, but it has to be done within the sphere of reason. And I think it can't be a formal canceling. It just has to be people just sort of reject it. People reject it because the other ideas out there are preferable to it. Sort of like Elly said, or somebody said, offering something positive. Or maybe was that you, Michael? Offering something positive in exchange for this negative. What do you think?
Definitely me.
Oh, is that you? What do you think, Rick? Do you think the same thing?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I never thought of anti-communist attitudes in the United States as forming a kind of cancel culture, because I only associate cancel culture with the new version of it. But that's an interesting historical analysis. And what I was thinking when you were talking about it is that one of the other, and I'm sure you thought about this, but one of the other, what's that word, collateral damage points of that phenomenon with the communism was that ordinary Americans don't even know anything about it. But that's also with the damping down of, well, I don't know how bad it is in Australia, but American education system is churning out people who are historically ignorant. And so, but we don't talk about it. We just, we have this kind of simplistic, most people, grew up in a time like after 1989, the Cold War ended, so most young people don't know anything about communism. And then the only thing that they hear about it is, free education, free healthcare, free everything, So it's a kind of informational vacuum because of, if you're right, that it got pushed underground, that conversation. It left popular culture and went into academia and then was retooled and repackaged through sophisticated language, like, all that nonsense that James Lindsay was talking about last week, where everything was kind of repackaged. It's like double speak about all this stuff now. So the average person has no idea what socialism really is.
Right. So, well, because you see socialism, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but to me, you see socialism having its sources and sort of Fitzhugh and Marx, and then you see that this utopian idea of the way society will be laid out because of this historical necessity or whatever isn't working. So they start shifting definitions and meanings around to try to make a system that they think is more compatible with some effective way of creating a state, utopia. So, fascism becomes an iteration of it, and Leninism is an iteration of it. and then none of those work, right? Forcing the revolution on the proletariat doesn't work. Just shifting the focus from the workers of the world to the nation state and to the nationality, that doesn't work. Corporate statism doesn't work. But now they found through the 60s and the birth of the New Left these contradictions in American society that they could exploit. Well, we're a rights-respecting society that doesn't consistently cohere to our own ethics, and so they use that inconsistency as a way of sowing the seed, conflating with complete skepticism respecting the whole system. So the whole system is bad because there are these imperfections, these human imperfections, and they have a standard that's utopian too, right? Well, there's still poverty, so capitalism must not work. Well, there's inequality, so capitalism must not work. Well, there's racism, so capitalism must not work. And I think they come at it from that notion that humans are determined, right? Everything's deterministic. The mechanical universe, a certain way, humans are a sort of element of the mechanical universe. They don't understand free will at all. And they try to adjust their philosophies to fit that premise in and exploit these weaknesses. And that's what I think all these theories, these queer theory is, critical race theory, whatever the fuck else they have going on.
There seems to be like a really strong theme in all this stuff of just telling other people what to think. It's, you know, so we had this idea of people thinking for themselves and and just like that's been the common thread in everything I see, that you should be this way, you should think this way. It's actually kind of hijacking that independent thought process and putting someone else's ideas in over the top.
Yeah, because they don't believe that you have an independent thought process. And Rick, you can correct me. I think they think that
Absolutely.
You're influenced by externals. Your class determines who and what you are. And now it's broken up into smaller and smaller segments, but not so small that it actually gets to the individual, because then they'll have to, divorce themselves from all their determinism and say, well, the individual has free will. So they have to just break you into smaller and smaller groups. Your gender, your race, your, whatever the fuck they come up with now to classify you.
Yeah, it's the rejection and denial or deconstruction or whatever you want to call it of the individual and of individual agency, so that if you have whatever ideas, any of us here have our own ideas, well, really, those aren't our ideas. Those are just reflective of our white privilege, for example, or heteronormative privilege or whatever it is, right? So all you are is a bag of the identity groups that you belong to. And those things are determinative, not you. Right? Because we don't want individuals to have determinative ability, to be their own self-determining kinds of beings. So it's the denial of agency, which also works when you complain about something like that's institutional or structural. If that's where all the causal powers are and you're doing something that aligns with that evil structure, you're a tool of that institutional oppression, right? So like the whole thing just kind of works very well together. It's a very clever set of ideas strategically.
And plus, I think it has grains of truth to it.
Yes.
Right, because their concept is that pretty much what we consider right and wrong are constructs, they're social constructs, and there is a lot of truth to narratives. Sort of tell us a lot, but. And the right, I've noticed, is adopting this as well. So I'm reading Jonah Goldberg's book right now on the suicide of the West, and I'm disappointed to see him adopting the same philosophy of subjectivism. So his concept is, look, we have this thing called the West. We have this miracle we call capitalism that came out. Where did it come from? Well, we can't say specifically. I mean, we could say from the Dutch and from the English, but we can't pin any specific causal elements to why capitalism came up. So let's just say it's this miracle that came up from a confluence of a million and one forces that are difficult to pin down. And the only way we can really defend it is to say is to say, well, it's good. It does. What the fuck? Where was I going with this? For Christ's sake, I just lost my thread. For fuck's sake.
But what you were saying reminded me of, like, because I think I read that book a while ago.
Now I remember. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, Mark.
No. Well, because he's saying in essence, we can't really defend capitalism. We just have to start with this series of presumptions that it's good. And there are these other ideas out there, these other social systems out there that we know ours are better than, but we can't quite defend it. We can't quite know why it's good. And why I'm saying all this, I don't even remember now, but it's okay. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I think that.
Oh, go
Go ahead.
No, I'll say one little thing to help Mark realize that he wasn't losing track. I saw a connection there. And because what we were saying is that it's these institutional, large systemic structures that have all the causal powers. So you were saying that Jonah, is his name Jonah Goldberg?
Yeah.
He's falling for that too, but when he's saying that, capitalism is just this historical process, we can't really even identify it. It's in a league with this kind of absence of individual agency, individual rights, the philosophy of individualism, all that stuff. He's giving the game away by saying it's these macro level processes that we don't control.
Not only that we don't control, but he's not connecting them to reality. It's just sort of a matter of luck that we happen to believe this narrative and some other country believes another narrative. Right. It's not like we're not referencing reality at any point to validate our concepts. So he shifts like these people do. He's sort of a rationalist in a way. He doesn't think there's any relationship between ideas and reality. And that's what we have on the other side, contending with the people on the left. That's a losing proposition right there.
Michael.
So a couple things. I hope I can remember them. I think I had like 4 points when I was listening to y'all. So one of them was so I think the systemic structural problems as opposed to agency. And I didn't listen to last week's podcast, but I know James Lindsay has kind of talked about that, the fact that you can't have agency if every problem can be attributed to this vague sort of thing that you can't really grasp. It's not concrete. This is systemic, and that really sort of came. I was thinking the other day. I've been following this Chauvin trial. I don't know if you guys have, but it's been an interesting sort of back and forth between the witnesses that they bring on that are the so-called experts, and it seems to, and there were actually a couple of witnesses that actually the prosecution called that actually were, you could argue, were beneficial to the defense after cross-examination. The defense attorney's a really smart guy. They're all smart, but there's a multitude of potential issues that are going on here. His arteries were 90% clogged. He had taken 3 times the amount of fentanyl that will kill you. In fact, there were the pills with his saliva on them in the cop car. The way that he was restraining him didn't necessarily kill him. The point is there's a multiple possibility of factors, right? But depending on your ideology, you're going to zero in on one factor, right? Because there can only be one answer, right? And that's because there can't be, you can't have needed to be put in a submissive sort of position or a restrained position on the ground. There's all these things that George Floyd could have potentially done to not be in this situation. And when he was in this situation, he did some, he took the pills, he told them to put him on the ground there, and then he's got the heart issues, he's got the drugs in the system, all these things. But it's almost a microcosm of the politics that we're seeing in that all of that, it doesn't matter, right? It shouldn't matter to the jury if you ask somebody of particular ideologies on the left about all these potential things that create a reasonable doubt about what actually caused it, which part of that is it could have been Chauvin could be completely responsible, but the point is you can't know. And it's very easy to get rid of the agency and say, we're just going to push it. It's always going to be this thing over here, right? It's going to be the answer. The other thing I was actually, I think now
institutional racism was the immediate conclusion of those millions of people who were marching and burning things down all over the world. That was the immediate conclusion. Just
right.
because of the video. Yeah,
exactly. Right. Like, and on Twitter, a lot of people were saying, why do we need a trial? We have video, right? So that is a direct,
Wow.
you can link that right back to critical race theory, where they say we're trying to undermine the whole liberal order, or get rid of the whole liberal order, which would include a presumption of innocence. The other thing I was thinking when you guys were talking was about the so with that book, a lot of times people start their this is the rationalism point I think that Mark was making, is that people start their discussion at the level of politics, and they don't make that connection to the individual and to morality. And so philosophy starts at politics. It doesn't have any ethics, epistemology, metaphysics. It's just like, we're going to start at politics and just kind of go from there. And it's like, you can't get to the right answer if you disconnect there. You're unless you're just completely lucky, but even then you can't know that you're lucky because you've disconnected there. And the other thing in that book that he did was, he looked back at Woodrow Wilson, and it was a sort of a more sophisticated Dinesh D'Souza saying, well, look, they're the ones that are the bad guys or whatever, because they had the slaves, they had this, but it's not really, saying, here are the right set of ideas, and let's tie it all the way back to, why. And that's really is a form of rationalism, where I think that's on the right is just as guilty as on the left, is that they start their discussion of politics at politics, which is just a sort of a floating abstraction, without going back to, like, why would we say that one politics is better than the other, and what is the purpose of politics? It's like, never get into that. I had a couple other things, but I don't remember, so I'll just stop there. That's pretty long-winded, sorry.
I hope we hear a little more from Lou and Elly and Rose today. Hi, Elly. I don't want it to just be, it's just a coincidence that 3 men are doing most of the talking here.
Well, I can go next. Is that okay?
Please.
Okay, so my topic, I actually have like pages of topics. I wanted to talk about double standards. That was my main issue, especially between, let's say, Gina, Pedro, and James Gunn. They're like Gina and Pedro specifically, because we know comparing today's climate to Nazi Germany was Gina's comment, but Pedro had the same comments about comparing Nazi Germany's putting the people in the internment camps, concentration camps, and then in the US, comparing it to the putting the people down in cages at the border. And Pedro seemed to like he got away with like scot-free because he's off making The Last of Us for HBO Max. And then you got Gina, who's not going to get a renewed contract with Disney, and I just think it's a little bit double standardish. And then you got James Gunn, who made all those comments years ago, and pretty much like Mark's situation, it came back, and then Disney was like, yeah, we're going to fire you. And then WB picked up James Gunn for the Suicide Squad sequel. And I was just like, why is there double standards here and not there? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Is it because the one's not liberal or something? I'm just trying to understand that.
What did James Gunn say?
What was it? You gotta remind me. It was like some tweets he made about, what was it? Quote me if I'm wrong. Wasn't it the pedophile tweets or something like that? I do remember that one.
I don't know.
Well,
it was like years ago, but it came back and it resurfaced is what I'm saying. And then Disney was like, no, we don't like that.
I'm not sure if this point is pedantic or not, but I would say that it's not really a double standard. It's a lack of standards,
Okay.
because you can't have a standard if you're going to only apply it in a tribalistic way. But I don't know if I'm just being a picker of nits here.
It's okay. I'm trying to word it. I'm not the best at it, but I just noticed that it was just like, you got one here and one there, and it's like, why? I know it's a, sorry.
So I'm looking at some of his tweets right now. So they are really inappropriate, horrible tweets. Wondering which Disneyland character would be the worst to get raped by. I think it's Goofy, but Sleepy would suck too. So another one, I like it when little boys touch me in my silly place. Shh. Here's one. The Expendables was so manly, I fucked the shit out of the little pussy boy next to me. The boys are back in town. She just made a joke about ass raping my friend when she was asleep. I'm doing a big Hollywood film adaptation of The Giving Tree with a happy ending. The tree goes back and gives the kid a blowjob.
Yeah, you said pretty bad
Well,
things
it's
back
just
then.
I think we got the
Isn't
idea,
it?
Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the
I'm
guy's
just
got
like-
the guy's got no class. That's for sure. What would you say
Please
about
don't
this?
cut that out of context.
What would you, I just wanted you to see fully what the guy said. I mean, there's a whole string more I could go on. This guy has a poor sense of humor and bad timing, and he sounds like he's trying to be controversial and funny, but he just doesn't have it in him.
And Disney brought him back to do Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Yeah, I would consider those tweets to be far worse on a lot of levels than Gina Carano saying, in effect, this is the way Nazi Germany started out, by marginalizing people and otherizing them, and this is where it ends. I thought that was it. Actually, I know that I think my mentor, Yaron Brooke, didn't think it was very sensible, but I actually thought it was sensible. And when I heard her interview on Ben Shapiro, I thought she was a fairly sensible person. And Pedro was actually making a direct comparison. He wasn't even making a philosophical, metaphorical one. He was like, look at this. It wasn't even a picture from the appropriate time too. So it was a lie in the picture. And then he sort of made an accusation. It wasn't a philosophical thought. It wasn't a cautionary tale, like she said. Be careful, guys. Don't otherize people because this is where it leads. He was literally accusing the administration of doing Nazi shit. So you're right. There is a double standard. I'd be interested in Rick's point of view about this and everybody on the panel, because it seems to me that political leftism, with all of its philosophy, it promotes narcissism and a lack of introspection. And I wonder why that is. And maybe lack of introspection, narcissism go hand in hand. But is there anything about the epistemology of these folks that promotes this kind of outlook where they just can't read other people? They only look at it from a certain prism, and they can't see their own inconsistencies.
I think that's it, because I've been guilty of such things too. Like if it's like, since Pedro's like Democrat and all that, people are going to be like, oh, it's okay because he's a Democrat, then I should just ignore what he said. But if he was Republican, for instance, they'd be like burning him at the stake.
So it's as simple as a tribal thing. He's in my tribe, so we'll excuse the bad things he does because he's in our tribe, and essentially he's working for the good.
That's what I believe, and I've seen it. Like it's all over social media.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and it's disappointing because I fall into the Democrat, and I keep a pretty open-minded. I mean, Mark and I have had this conversation, and I swing mostly left, but I still have views on the right too, and I'm still struggling to find a balance myself. And when I see stuff done on the left, it's like, why did I support this again? It's like bad. Why am I supporting this? So I'm still struggling to figure out that.
There's a psychological bias, or it's almost like a fallacy. It's very similar to the simple fallacy of double standard, but psychologists call it the fundamental attribution error. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but so when people who are other to you, right, when they commit actions that you want to criticize, you attribute those negative actions as being caused by a fundamental attribute of their character, namely their evil. Right? And so there's no excuse for it. It's not about the circumstances, the context, or any nuance or anything. It's like, oh, they did that. That's one of them. They're evil. That's where it came from. Right? So you're attributing a fundamental characteristic to their identity, which causes their negative behavior. On the other hand, when you or your teammates commit the exact same actions, well, it was a circumstance, it was a contingency, there's a context, it's very nuanced, and, that's out of character, and, but, this kind of thing. So it's like, we also call this the fallacy in logic of special pleading, right? Like, there's a rule which I allegedly adhere to, but when I break it, I make a special plea about the good reasons why I broke that rule, but I never afford that excuse to anyone else. Right. So these are, one is a psychological cognitive bias, that people actually, do this kind of thing. You were thinking narcissism and non-reflexivity. I think that might be higher. I mean, it's certainly high on both ends, where you've got ideologues that are committed on both sides of the political spectrum. They don't really think for themselves. They've adopted an ideology, so they buy into the tribalism, and then they commit the fundamental attribution error or the special pleading fallacy. Whenever there are these apparent double standards, they have excuses for them. I remember when I first started vocalizing my new views on campus with my colleagues, who are all, I'm in the belly of the woke beast over there. I remember them pulling, a number of them would take me on the side because they like me, and I mean, I'm friends with everybody in my college, except one or two really woke lunatics who just, once they realized that I changed my views, that was it for them. But I remember it's like some of the pretty good people coming up to me and saying, Rick, there are white hats and black hats. Like, stop with this reasoning, you're hurting our team. And I'm like, I'm not on your team. And then, no, there are no white hats and black hats. There are good arguments and bad arguments. There are moral actions and there are immoral actions. And I don't care who commits them. That's the way it works. And if I believe something, I'm going to say it. You don't like it, kick me off your version of the team. So what?
But do you think there's anything in their epistemology that makes them narcissistic, self-involved, incapable of weeding out these contradictions? Because I've noticed this.
I think it's a failure of epistemology. It's an absence of an epistemology. They don't have a conscious epistemology. They have an ideology, which is future idealism, utopia oriented. They're on the right side of history, so they don't have to think about anything for themselves. And they've also been conditioned by the herd that they belong to, that when they move the wrong way, they get socialized away from that position. They learn vicariously by seeing people like me take a beating in, group emails and stuff like that.
But they get a feedback loop from participating in piling on and,
virtue signaling. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm saying it's kind of like a second-handedness in a sense, right? In that they get this ideology gives them meaning, right? And it only takes one tribe to have tribalism, because they will create the black hat on the other folks, right? And so I'm not saying there aren't two tribes or three tribes. I'm saying that, you only have, there's only one tribe right now that has all of the institutional power, okay, and the cultural power. And that's why I think I tweeted the other day something like, I don't know, I don't remember what I tweeted, but essentially, I feel like I'm part of the counterculture now, right? And that's kind of cool. It's like, I got something to, it's fun to think that you're sort of, fighting for justice or whatever. But is it like they're getting this feedback from, like, they get likes on social media, right? By piling on and everything and calling people out. And so that becomes their form of, their self-esteem. Their self-esteem is built on this tribal warfare.
And they've farmed out their sense of identity to the collective. And so if they do
Yes.
things that favor the collective smiles upon them, and then they get that little glow. And that's their weird, distorted narcissism. They might be better off if they had a kind of greater narcissistic epistemology where, their own thinking and values and beliefs mattered more to them. And they,
Yeah. More.
My
What's the philosopher that some people say is similar to Ayn Rand?
Nozick?
Nietzsche.
Oh, Nietzsche, right.
Right. They were maybe a little more Nietzschean.
Right.
They'd be better. They might not be all the way, but they'd at least be better than where they're at now.
At least be somewhat individualistic. Yeah. So there are some philosophies that approach individualism more than others. The folks.
Well, it just seems to me now that there's some topics that are so explosive and so controversial that it feels like if you utter anything about the topic, it will enrage somebody and they'll be all attacking you and stuff. But then what I noticed is that when the George Floyd death happened, people were getting attacked because they didn't say anything. So if you did say something, it could be taken out of context or you didn't say it in the right way. But then if you weren't talking about it, well, then you're a racist because you weren't talking about it. And what gets me about cancel culture is that not only is it petty and wishy-washy as hell, but it doesn't give people a chance to grow or to, it's like something somebody said 5 years ago could still be used against them. And like a person could change in 5 years. A person could go to therapy in 5 years. And cancel culture to me doesn't give people a chance to improve. And even when people try to apologize or explain themselves, well, then people just, kick him in the crotch about that. And, so I don't really can't win.
I feel like
that's one thing I hate about it.
I feel like one of the great things about most traditional religions is there's a redemptive quality to them that understands that humans are flawed. They understand that humans are flawed, and they give them a mechanism to redeem themselves. There's always something in most religions to exercise forgiveness and to move on from something that you've done and to evolve and grow. And wokeness is a religion that doesn't have a redemptive aspect to it at all. But I think that comes from its deterministic nature. Would you agree, Rick? I mean, there's no redeeming somebody. You can't move anywhere if you're determined by exterior forces. There's no actual
I'm not sure
internal growth.
I agree with that.
Go ahead.
If you're
I
determined,
disagree with that.
in what respect?
I think you can become woke. I think most religions, in order to be redeemed, you have to adopt that religion.
Right. That's the
you
only
can't really-
redemption. The only redemption is to become woke completely.
Right.
That's
And
the only redemption.
I guess so. So perhaps that's like
You have to convert. You have to be a convert.
So it's like born again Christianity in a way.
Yes.
You're a sinner. You have to acknowledge that you're a sinner, and the only redemption for your nature is Jesus Christ. But
And
even
that's what Robin DiAngelo did. She said, "I am a white supremacist. I take responsibility for that. And I can acknowledge it and articulate it. And there's all this, and that's what the reality is. And just because I'm now an ally and I acknowledge it and I, take the knee and all that other kind of stuff, she gave herself a redemption according to that philosophy that, she so well articulated.
I believe she is a white supremacist.
I think she is. Yeah, but she meant it in the opposite sense.
A neo-white supremacist.
Yes. Just like a neo-racist. This is neo-racism. Great conversation.
So
Elly, did you finish what you were thinking of or saying?
I've been mulling over a few things. It's it's all about emotionalism, isn't it? Right? Like it's people's outrage just being expressed without any kind of thought, and that's directing the decision making. So there's no kind of there's no thought process really going on about fairness or justice. It's just whether it's upset somebody, and that needs to be addressed before anything else can happen. I'm trying to think how to. I do prefer to put my ideas in writing. This is different.
It's okay. You can come back to us when you want to say more. Was someone else was about to speak? I heard somebody, but I don't know who it was.
I was just going to say that I think
Mike.
that with cancel culture, though, it almost guarantees that there will become sort of critical mass amongst this the adherents to this ideology that is, attacking free speech and trying to get people kicked off of, fired at the worst. Maybe not. Maybe that's not worst, right? Because they can come to your house and they can kick in your door. But fired, kicked off of social media. When you're, religions. There are religions who are trying to get more converts, and there are religions who are trying to create so much purity that I think that there'll be sort of critical mass where the pendulum starts flipping the other direction. I'm not one of those. I'm not black pilled. I'm more white pilled. I think it is, where you're sort of optimistic. In the long run, I think that this is going to be sort of a self-imploding, ideology. But in the short run, I think it can get a lot worse.
Well, I mean, it may be self-imploding like the Jacobins in France, but it might usher in a really crazy era for us, as it did for France in the 18th century, right? That gave us Napoleon and European wars, and who knows if it may usher in a new era of Trump, God forbid, or some other strongman that people in the opposition think they need to control these chaotic forces.
Yeah, and that goes to the lack of redemption or forgiveness, because if somebody truly is racist or intolerant of people, and then by pushing them out of society, then you sort of force them into the arms of the people who are sort of the true believers of those bad ideas. You don't give them a chance to say, you know what, I've thought about it, and I've got different, I guess I was wrong there, right?
Rose and Lou, we need to hear from one of you guys.
Well, I can go, I think.
Good.
Well, there's a few things that I've been wondering about the cancel culture thing. I don't know why I have this feeling that since this crazy pandemic started last year, people started to grabbing things that happened eons ago, and they started to cancel things. I mean, for example, movies that happened during the 60s, 70s, and they just grab the concept or even the characters, and they think this movie, it's not good, it's xenophobic or racism. And I grew up with a lot of movies from Disney and old classic movies, and I don't know, I don't think the concepts are that these awful, horrible concepts are there. So why people started to say these despicable things about almost everything? I don't know if you guys have any thoughts why these things are started to happening, because it seems like we can have an option, an opinion these days. It's horrible, not only on Twitter, like in every social media. Every time that I wanted to speak my mind about any subject, if people don't agree with me, they will just block me, rage on me for nonsense. I don't know. It's kind of overwhelmed.
Yeah, I feel like if you think that the entire culture is saturated with racism, you're going to start finding it everywhere, because it's like when you get a, I don't know if this happens to you, whenever I get a different car, I suddenly notice my car on the road a lot. Like, wow, I never noticed there were so many of my car on the road. And once you make that claim and you embed that in your perceptual apparatus, or your whatever part of your brain anticipates things, you're going to be on the move. You're going to be sensitized to that. And I think people are finding things that in many respects probably do have, racist overtones, or certainly not the way we would characterize people from other ethnicities today. We've evolved quite a bit more, but they don't take into consideration, as I think we've been talking about, the evolution of humanity. To me, movies like that can be very valuable, and histories like the one that we of course have are very valuable to see how far we've come. Use it as a point of reference. Look, actually human beings are evolving, and Americans in particular are evolving. And yeah, the right, I mean, I see some of the reactions from the left today as partly justified, in the sense that, well, they're reacting to a jingoistic right wing that's claiming that, our history was pristine, our founding fathers were giants, which they were. There's truth to it, but there's also great complexity, and it comes, I think, from a desire for truth to lend dimension to history that now we're not getting in either side. Both establishment sides are giving us their perspective of history, but it's not what real history is, and real history is somewhere in the middle, right?
I just think that we stopped evolving. I mean, when I study history, we study from a certain point to a certain point. And I think since this century, I think our culture just stopped. I feel our society is stuck in thinking, ideas, everything.
You're right. I think ideas are taking us backwards, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think we're in a retrograde motion.
At the same time, the elimination of movies like Gone with the Wind and songs like Baby It's Cold Outside are eliminating parts of real history. So, and that's part of that thing that I said when you were talking about communism, cancel culture back, several decades ago. Well, what was the fallout, or what do I call it? Collateral damage in the culture was that people didn't even know about communism. So now if they can get rid of all this stuff, the next generation coming up won't even know about it. That there are other ways of thinking.
Yeah, but not only that, it's making sexual politics, real play between men and women, like Baby It's Cold Outside. It's turning it into something sinister. Oh, here's this evil guy trying to keep the woman inside so he can have sex with her. What evil. I mean, it was a playful song. You could hear that song and it's so fun. This is men, this is women. They're playing this game with each other, and it's all benign. There's no benignity. Is that a word in any human interaction anymore?
It doesn't make any sense to me, considering how rap is now and all the songs out, and people are forgetting
that's the double standard.
Exactly.
Well, that's just that. Well, because if you come from a community that white lefties determine is poor or somehow oppressed, then anything is within your moral scope. You can do anything, literally anything, including burn down businesses, loot them, and kill people.
Because they're all oppressed victims.
Yeah. And including the poetry of the street, like rap, even if it's disrespectful to women or emulates rape or crime. Hey, that's that culture. That's that from standpoint epistemology, that's where those people are. And you have to listen to that message because it's telling you something.
I think that there are a lot of really good movies that couldn't be made today because people have a problem I've noticed understanding context when it comes to movies and storylines. That's like, I don't know if y'all have seen Pretty Baby with Brooke Shields, but she was about 12 years old or so when she was in that movie, and she plays, and it has a storyline, it has a plot, and she plays a young girl that grows up in a brothel. And I think it has Susan Sarandon in it as her mother. And of course it has a part of her like naked and stuff, and it shows her skin in the bathtub. And, you know, it is, like I said, it's a period piece. And but if it was made today, people would just lose their minds over it.
I don't know
director,
about that.
I think on a certain level, it would be looked at as different than it was back then.
What was the movie that just came out recently that got the same kind of flack?
On Netflix, The Girls Dancing.
Yeah.
Is it Cuties?
It was Cuties.
Cuties.
Ah,
Yes,
yeah.
Right, but I thought that movie
Yeah.
illustrated very well exploitation and how damaging social media is and where it places these kids' attention. It had to show that. You had to be uncomfortable to see where it went. And the main character, gets liberated from it, becomes a kid again at the end, instead of striving for this notion of what it is to be a sexualized adult when she's just a kid and needs to be a kid. So that caused a lot of controversy. And even at the time, I remember with Brooke Shields' movie, there was a lot of flack against Brooke Shields' mother for letting her do that movie. I met Brooke Shields. I was a huge Brooke Shields fan when I was a kid. I was obsessed with her. And I remember her mom getting a lot of flack, thinking she was exploiting her daughter. And that was the concern. And it's a similar concern, I think, with Cuties about child exploitation. So would it get made today? I mean, there are certain movies, I think, that are more sensitive, I think, to our culture as it stands now than something like that.
Depends on the spin that's put on it. Like Cuties had that spin that's acceptable nowadays.
It's acceptable nowadays. And plus, it was a female director who was who was directing. I think she wrote it as well. I'm not sure, but who was coming from a pretty clear perspective, probably being on the other end of that. Understanding what it's like to be a woman faced with social media images and sexualized images of women, and how one deals with that at a young age. I think she was just filming her experience. It was valid to me. I thought it was a pretty interesting movie, actually.
I actually just.
It's also.
What's that?
To say, like,
No, it's just
possible. Oh, sorry, Grace. Go on.
No, you can go.
All right. Well, it is possible as an adult to be exposed to an uncomfortable idea and decide that you don't like it. So when these things are being censored or we're not allowed to talk about them or think about them, it's kind of like saying that we're children. And I think that's my issue with it. That I want to actually look at a movie and go, no, that's bad. That's a bad idea. I disagree with that. I don't need someone to tell me that.
Right. It's like, to me, ideas are like, to me, the marketplace of ideas is sort of like, the world of germs and bacteria. Like your body has to expose itself to all of that stuff in order to develop a strong immune system. And you as a human being should be exposed to all kinds of ideas so that you have a strong epistemology and a strong sense of truth, and you can combat what's bad and embrace what's good.
Karl Popper made that argument in a book of his. It's a pretty dense book, The Open Society and Its Enemies, where he argues for the kind of incrementalism that defines the West, through our governance and all that kind of stuff. And like that we should be terrified of any kind of globalizing, totalitarian, ideologies that would close off a society from the kinds of ideas which it would then lose immunity to.
Right.
Like we need to have completely open discourse so that we have resilience. Like if our structure, our societal model, our worldview, if it's so fragile that being exposed to any other idea will destroy it, then it's useless. It's dangerous. It's the worst thing that we could do. And we're moving in that direction through this totalitarian blocking of ideas that we dislike or that the far left dislikes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're becoming the boy in the plastic bubble
Yeah,
right now.
exactly.
Yeah, that's what makes it totalitarian and authoritarian, is the fact that it's really an exercise of power to say we are going to we're going to put political pressure on people and make it exact a cost for daring to look at any kind of art that doesn't pass today's standards, woke standards, right? Their standards, right? It's like, it's all about power. If you understand that it's all about power and only about power, it starts to make sense. You can't get to communism without destroying the things that tie us together in a liberal society. And that part of that is art.
Yeah, so the question now is, to me, maybe anybody here who's a bit of a historian can tell me, is this cancel culture that we're experiencing now worse than any cancel culture we've experienced in the past? Because this is a phenomenon that has gone through history, of course, in different categories, of from Jews being pogromed and pushed out of entire states, to witches being burned at the stake, to sectarian violence between Catholics and Protestants. I mean, all across, we could come up with a billion ways in which people are otherized and canceled. But is this worse?
I don't know. I mean, I guess God kicking Adam and Eve out of the garden is the original cancel culture. I guess that's the original one. You're out.
For thinking for themselves. Yeah, and we're
That's not bad.
But does anybody think it's worse than any of these past phenomena?
Well, I do think something. I think our society now create these. We want this society to be free of racism, homophobia, all these threats, this horrible thinking. But I think these groups are becoming too extremist. For example, in Portugal, Disney launched that movie Soul. I didn't watch, and Portugal did the Portuguese dub for the kids, and our society started to criticize the company because the main character in the original movie was black, but the male Portuguese that made the dub was white, and they just started to criticize the company because they should have put the black guy doing the original voice. I think that's nonsense, in my opinion. I want to hear about you guys.
Yeah,
I think it's worse.
That doesn't make any sense, considering a lot of foreign, especially animations, they use female leads to do the male voices, especially in Japanese animation. So yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, if the actress or actor is good, put them up there. I don't care about their skin color.
Yeah, but there's that idea that from the purist section of the woke community, where they don't think that somebody from a different standpoint on the epistemological scale understands the standpoint of someone else, and so they can't authentically reproduce that. I mean, even if they're just doing a voice, if they're doing a voice, it's probably even more insulting. Like Hank Azaria apparently had to apologize for playing the East Indian character on The Simpsons, which he did quite well for years. But I guess somebody of his ethnicity imitating a bit of a larger than life version of a stereotyped sort of accent is insulting to people, and additionally you can't understand them. So all you'll do is just you'll produce a stereotype in these people's minds, and so you shouldn't be allowed to.
It's about power too. It's about power too, and this representativeness idea. Like if there's a black character, that the role is of a black person, it better be a black person playing it. Not only that, but in all these other classics like Shakespeare and Gone with the Wind, like those movies, if there's anything worthwhile in them, they need to be decolonized and done by people of color. There's all this ideology that's all part of this massive, crazy structure taking over the woke culture. I think it's worse because, it's harder for people to realize that woke ideology is not so good than it is for them to think like the Catholic Church is a little wrong, like Martin Luther was right, like, you have to buy your way into heaven, like it's hard. It might be harder nowadays to expose the contradictions in woke ideology, not because they're not all over the place, but because so many people are just completely swallowed the Kool-Aid about it. And they just think it's progressive, it's the right side of future, we're the advanced people, we're the good people, we're the compassionate people. So all this ideology is good. So, and it's just, I don't know, I worry about that.
I think it's worse. It's a soft inquisition in a sense. And, but at the same time, so one of the indicators that it's worse is that you have corporate America adopting it. So now you have corporate America, the academia, the news media, the arts, Hollywood, etc., education. Oh, I said that already. So that's what makes it worse. But I think that I don't think that when you say so many people are drinking the Kool-Aid, I don't think it's that many. I think it's enough, right, that they've been able to sort of work their way into the culture. And like Marx said, this started a long time ago, right? These ideas. But I think the downfall, and to the credit or to the benefit of our society, is that technology is kind of become the public square, and there will be solutions in technology whereby I'm hearing of there's going to be decentralized networks now where you'll be able to you won't have to sign up for Facebook or Twitter to be in the public square. We'll have servers that are connected, and you could create your own website. And, with the exception of maybe payment processors, you won't be able to, you'll be able to get around these gatekeepers of our society right now, such as, social media.
Well, I think they brought this on themselves. They're so dishonest and so obviously partisan, that the good thing about that was it's got people thinking about ways to subvert them and find their way into that marketplace of ideas without being hampered. So I knew that was going to happen for sure, and I think that's good. But I mean, how does that not just result in everybody isolating in their own separate bubbles and not ever really integrating with anybody outside of their own bubble?
It's the nature of the internet.
Yep.
It's connectivity.
Yeah, I think there'll be so the other good part is that you have liberals. So the woke do not like liberals. So you have basically the progressives, the liberals, and then kind of everybody else, which would be like your libertarians, objectivists, anarchists, whatever. And there's an alliance there, and you take that alliance between people who don't want to throw away our whole society over, problems that we do have, that everybody acknowledges that we have, maybe not to the same degree, obviously, as the woke would say. And so you combine that with technology actually is gonna go faster. Technology is gonna go faster than the those that would try to silence you.
Okay, so that's good. I like your optimistic.
Yeah, I hope you're right. And there's certainly money to be made in setting up those servers and everything else. So there's the marketplace, not just of ideas, but the marketplace itself.
And that's the one good thing about capitalism, which Jonah Goldberg sort of puts down by way of what philosopher? Max Weber? I forget. No, Schumpeter, one of these cats, who said, capitalism's undoing is that it's irreverent, right? It knocks down tradition. It has this creative destruction sort of element to it. So it's always moving forward, and that would somehow knock down the pillars of tradition that our country is based on. I disagree fundamentally with that. I think he just can't connect the dots because he's a conservative. But But in this case, you're seeing how it's not allowing a tradition of wokeness to settle before the competition starts eroding it. And I think that's fucking great. But once again, I mean, Michael, you listen to Yaron Brook, right? Yaron thinks that the real threat is from the right, and that the left is too disintegrated, too chaotic, that they're going to sort of eat their own, and that the right is organized and sort of principled, you know, in ways that I've talked about in other podcasts, where, you know, religion is this integrated view of existence, unlike the woke culture. And so they can take that integration and command the heights eventually if they get the right elements. And he thinks that that is what we should fear.
Yeah, but I don't think the right is organized. I think the left is, they are masters of organization and
communication.
And communication, that's right. And they have all the channels of communication. And so, you know, if you want more optimism, here we are, we're having a conversation where, you know, we are just a speck of, you know, sand on a beach for all the people who, you know, are not liking kind of where the trajectory of where things are going. And yet that stands in the face of all of the institutional power that is pushing this ideology. And so, you know, it's just taking the reason that this ideology is gaining as much steam as it is because the right is not organized, and especially the Republicans. I mean, they are nowhere on that. Okay, technology, I said, is way up here, right? Republicans are way back here. Like, they'll always be behind. They're a reactionary type of, reactionary is not the right word, but they react. And
don't you think Trump has set them back even further? Because he's falling into that strongman thing. He's not combating these ideas on the level that they need to be combated at. He's appropriately rejecting them, but in all the wrong ways. And for all the wrong reasons. Almost all the wrong reasons. Not all the wrong reasons, but many of them are wrong.
Yes and no. I mean, there was a study that was done, and I don't remember who did it, but, you know, they put, if you took the middle of the political spectrum and you put Biden would be, say 50 is right in the middle. Not Biden, say Obama was like a 46 and Trump's like a 54. And so with Trump's policies, granted, some of them were certainly fascistic in an economic sense. You know, I think he was kind of in the mainstream of Republican politics from a policy perspective, which is not a compliment necessarily, right? But what I'm saying is, where Iran gets it wrong is that we don't have the power in the institutions, and so I don't see it flipping totally the other direction. I just don't see it there becoming a rising right wing, because if there was, then you would see people being sort of persuaded, but it's a very slow and gradual as people start sort of peeling off and saying, finding, I think what James Lindsay called their woke breaking point, right? And so these happens on the margins, and it's happened at a slow enough pace that, I'm not certain.
Even James went in for Trump, and that's where he lost sort of Helen Pluckrose, and he lost a lot of his academic friends and Brett Weinstein, right? Isn't he's like, I have friends on the right. I have, they're gravitating not towards, what we would consider a good opposition to the left, but to this Jonah Goldberg National Review version of the right, which is nothing to me.
Yeah, and they're just the establishment.
That's why I think Trump, since he sits outside of it, he offers them something emotional that they need, which is they think he's a strong man. And because he's a strong man, it gives them a sense of security in the midst of this chaos. And that appeals to a lot of people. And he can unite people under some very simplistic, under some bromides that will have popular appeal. I mean, the guy's a populist, straight up. Right. So that to me is a dangerous risk, because now we're talking about, 80 million, 90 million. The numbers are going to grow the more wokeness starts to damage people directly. I think those numbers are going to grow because the alternative is him. I mean, that's the alternative on the Republican side.
Yeah, but I think you can disagree with Trump on a lot of things, but I think he forced the left to basically show. So the other day, Rachel Maddow on it was at MSNBC, she spent 40 minutes talking about Trump Russia. What month is it? I mean, these people. I think I'm not going to credit Trump for this. It's not like he's some 4D chess player, but at the same time, I think that he ironically accelerating, because he has forced the left to go so far off the edge. He is accelerating, in my view. I could be wrong about this. The timeline of people sort of becoming red pilled, and red pill doesn't mean for everybody, doesn't mean Republican. It just means that you see the
Matrix.
you see the
woke matrix.
you see the media for being propagandist. You see sort of the big picture here. Anyway, I don't want to monopolize time, but
all right. So, yeah.
I wanted to ask, it's a slight shift, but it was the topic for today is free speech. And I can maybe intuit what the objectivist grounds for defending free speech would be, but I would just love to hear a little synopsis from, it doesn't have to be you because you're not the only objectivist in the room, I think, but
Yeah, Michael, you're an objectivist too, yeah?
yeah.
I am, yeah.
So if I say something off, you can, steer me in the right direction, but
because you could, like you said, no, it was you, Mark, who said, yeah, Trump made some right decisions, but for the wrong reasons. So, I mean, I'm just curious what the reasons are that link objectivism and free speech. I have some ideas about it, but that's all just me surmising. So I'd like to hear, I've never read anything directly about free speech.
Well, I think every virtue, including a social, political virtue like free speech, for objectivists is epistemological in nature. So it relates to, for anybody else on the panel who might not know what I'm exactly saying, it's that it's your mental grasp of reality. The way you gain knowledge and think is your epistemology, and virtues revolve around your capacity to think. And freedom of speech, of course, enables you as a reasoning independent being to incorporate as much information as possible in order to inform your choices with respect to living. So that has to be an open spigot so that you can choose properly, in my view. Am I missing anything, or you can probably articulate it better, Michael? Or?
No, I think you're spot on. There's a link between our thoughts and our actions, and speech is kind of right in the middle of there, especially as we interact with people in society.
Right. So the government has to protect our epistemological capacity, our ability to think and act on our thoughts, and free speech is the way to do it. And the separation of church and state is the way they protect our conscience, right? And so it's sort of an aspect of free speech, right? Free spirit, free conscience, free thinking. So Rand understood that thinking was our primary activity. It was our means of survival, and speech was sort of free speech was a social implementation of that in a way.
Yeah, and I would say politically, free speech is, the idea of free speech is what allows us to continue to have a government that is, I'm not saying continue, but we don't currently today, but like, the way that we have, that we keep a government in check is through, what's the speak truth to power or whatever. Like if you can't have the government, free speech pertains primarily to government restrictions, not social media, contrary to what many people would say. And you can't have the government dictating what you can say, because the stuff that you say about them relates directly to trying to limit their power over us, because they have a very defined role in societies that in terms of giving, keeping us free to go ahead and pursue the things that we want to pursue as humans.
Great,
thank you. Does that make sense, Rick?
That makes perfect sense. We know we're social beings, but that doesn't mean we're collectivists. But we epistemologically, I mean, most of us get most of our knowledge from the research of other people, the thoughts, analyses, and arguments of other people. And then we hear them, we can evaluate them and assess them on our own using our reasoning. But the less information that we have that's actually tethered to reality, then the less in touch with reality we'll be. And that's the closed society versus the open society.
Yeah. And that was precisely the argument I was having with Cubby, is her name, online, who criticized me for retweeting a friend of mine, Olivia Rondeau. She has a libertarian podcast. She's an anarchist. I don't agree with anarchy. I'm not on the anarchist page, but I retweeted my anarchist friend because I think these ideas need to be discussed. And I would go on her show to tell her why I thought anarchy was not good, you know? And so I retweeted her, and I guess the guy that she had on her show was a member of a group that some people had some issues with. And they claimed I was supporting the group. And I said, no, I'm supporting an open society and free speech. And I don't know if that, does anybody think that was clear to them, or were they deliberately myopic? Do you think it got through?
It's called a hard pill to swallow, and they didn't want to swallow it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a part of me, and maybe I'm, you know, maybe I'm just, I'm reading into this, but sometimes I think Cubby actually sees the point. I may be wrong, but I get the impression that she sees the point. She just doesn't want to acknowledge it.
Yeah,
then you won.
Oops.
I used to be like her 4 years ago. She doesn't see the point. She's closed-minded. I was exactly like her when I was 4 years ago. And since then, I've changed my views on things and become more open-minded. And that's why I'm here. I'm willing to learn. I want to expand. And it's just tiring seeing both sides go yap at each other, and no one's willing to like listen and just sit down and talk to each other. They just want to fight.
Well, imagine how annoying it is for objectivists to sit and watch two sides scream at each other as if there's real differences between them.
I know, right?
We see it as, well, there's, you know, you disagree on particulars, but you're sort of on the same page in every other way. So there's really nothing essentially different about you. It's like, you know, two people wearing the same suit, just a different color, and pointing out, you know, little non-essentials as if they're not wearing the same suit when they are. It's really, really aggravating, because we don't have a political home. Can you think of any place, Michael, that objectivists where they have a political home anywhere in the mainstream?
I mean, no, not really. I think I do sort of align. It's funny. I had an argument with an anarchist, and ultimately I said, look, you can't get to anarchism without going past objectivism, right? If I say there's only 3 roles of government, you say there are 0, and we have 100 or 1,000, you can't get to 0 unless you go past 3. So why are you and me arguing, right? Like, let's go argue with those people over there. And so I would say probably the Rothbards and the Mises crowd are probably the closest aligned politically to objectivists.
I wouldn't say Rothbard. I'd say the Mises crowd. But Rothbard is, when I read the Libertarian Manifesto, I was horrified by some of the stuff that he says.
Well, if you did a Venn diagram with the people who are on Mises and Rothbard, it'd be a pretty. Let's go with.
It would be very close. I know.
Let's go with what's his name? Let's go with Ron Paul.
Okay.
Instead of Rothbard.
He's sort of a tamer version of that, I guess. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, but otherwise we're out. I mean, I'm going to be on the Michael Malice show in a few days, and you know, he's of that, you know, Tom Woods anarchist ilk, and you know, that's not my crowd.
No, but you agree on everything that matters, because it's irrelevant about objectivism versus anarchy from a political perspective, because the point I made, where you can't get to no government without going past limited government. So
I mean, I would agree with, I don't know whether I would agree with you or disagree with you. There's a part of me intuitively that's like, I disagree. I don't know if that's just my contrarianness, but.
Well, I could be wrong. I kind of like, I just sort of sometimes.
Because I feel like when I talk to anarchists, I'm talking to people, and many of them are so educated, but I'm much more educated than I am. But I'm talking to people who seem to have also denied the evolutionary capacity of an institution. Like they don't see government having evolved over time, and that's almost like a denial of reality at almost a perceptual level. I mean, if you read any history, you have to see an evolution from the city states of Babylon to through the Magna Carta, and on from there.
Well, not only that, you could look at North Korea today, and you can look at the United States, and you can look at the United States today and the United States 200 years ago. So
yeah,
there you
have
go.
all kinds of comparison contrasts to do that shows you that government can be many different things, and it's actually it's not government itself. They're claiming like government itself, the monopoly on force itself is what's evil, and they can't come out of that perspective. Now, can you be in an alliance with somebody like that? I don't know. I don't think so. In the end, they contaminate your message. They fuck it up.
Well, yeah, but if Michael Malice was on here, he would certainly agree with you about wokeness, cancel culture, free speech.
That's what I was going to say. They are at least not woke, but they share something with woke. Both the woke and the anarchists, the way, at least the subset of them that you guys have been describing, are equally critical of the entire history of government. The only difference is the anarchist says get rid of government, and the woke folks say we need an idealistic government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but even the class-based socialists of old would be in opposition to Mark Pellegrino and Michael Malice at the same time. So if you're going to find allies, I think he's where you go. So
Michael Malice would be opposed to me, and he's probably going to try to take me apart on the show.
I'm going to listen because I listen to his podcast. So.
Oh, is it good?
It's really good because he's just very witty and entertaining.
Snarky, yeah. I like snark, but he's kind of. I mean, he knows a lot about Ayn Rand. He's writing a book, I think, about her right now.
Yeah, he's Russian.
Is he?
That's
right.
In Russia.
Yeah, that's right. But he's writing a book about her. So there you have a libertarian anarchist who's going to do a hatchet piece on Ayn Rand.
Oh.
And so much of what they claim to believe they plagiarized from her. So I find
it's too bad. It's too bad because I just feel like there's so much more low-hanging fruit. To go after objectivists just seems really. It just seems dumb.
Well, I feel like it's his, the compulsion of the anarchists to knock out coherent philosophy. Any coherent way of looking at the world, they have to knock out. He doesn't have a coherent. I don't know him enough to say this, so I shouldn't say this, that he doesn't have a coherent way of looking at the world. But most anarchists don't. When it comes to ethics, it's all subjective. That's why you can't have a singular body determining rules. Because there's no way that my rules could be the same as your rules, or the same as Rick's rules or Elly's rules.
Yeah, it's fundamentally incoherent, in my opinion.
I was wanting to ask if any of y'all had seen the satire they did of Ayn Rand in the movie Snowpiercer that Chris Evans was in, where they actually did a character that was basically like the dark version of how people see Ayn Rand.
Well,
I haven't met any Rand people that's seen that.
People generally have a dark version of Ayn Rand. That's, to me, the I would say the popular is this. I would say what maybe just because my circles are Hollywood, the popular perception of her is dark, and then there's
I have to step away for a minute, but I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay.
Keep going.
Yeah, I would say the dark, I mean, that characterization of her is in the movie precisely because lots of folks in Hollywood have a dark perspective of her. In fact, I'm trying to pitch an amazing version of Atlas Shrugged, and we went to a predominant producer in Hollywood, and she was like, "Well, thanks, Mark. We understand you. You guys have reimagined this work, but we actually did a documentary on Ayn Rand, and we would think it would be artistically wrong of us to take on this project because we actually consider her to be one of the worst human beings on the face of the earth."
Well, I mean, it's like when you look at Snowpiercer, even the idea of it is very much like the Hollywood or the idea of capitalism itself, which is that the rich people live at the front of the train and they have it good. They have a good life. And then the people at the back of the train are like the poor people and they're just fodder. And, you know, that was, and I thought this is, you know, it's actually very symbolic. I didn't care for the movie much, but, you know, it is actually symbolic of how people kind of think about stuff.
Well, I mean, ironically, it's a projection of socialism's actuality onto capitalism. I mean, socialism gives us an elite class, Platonic philosopher kings that determine everything, you know, means of production and what goes where, and then there's everybody else. And that's not what capitalism is. Capitalism doesn't produce those things, but that's the prism through which they see everything. So ironically, I find it interesting that they blame capitalism for the type of social stratification that you find in socialist countries.
Angel, have you seen the TV show?
Huh?
The new one?
No,
Angel,
I have
have
not
you seen the new Snowpiercer? I only watched a few, but I actually thought that it was
No,
quite
I've heard
different.
of it, but
The way that they handled the ideas was a little, maybe a little less black and white, you know. I don't. Yeah, it wasn't.
it was more nuanced, maybe.
There was a
not
little bit more
as-
room for interpretation, I think,
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
who was right and wrong, and it was actually asking you to decide. I only got 2 episodes in anyway, but
Yeah, I mean, I like stuff that's more complicated, less like black and white kind of. I mean, I don't want to feel like a writer is beating me over the head with good versus evil, you know. I don't like that kind of hand holding. So, you know.
There's a bunch of shows like that. Lovecraft Country and Watchmen for starters. Those
What's
were
that? What about
we were the whole, how to explain it? We were talking about Cuties, and then I haven't read the book, so I'm only basing it off the TV show. Lovecraft Country has like has anybody seen it besides me?
I think I saw a couple of episodes of it.
Well, the show premises is based on Lovecraftian horror, which we all know doesn't really generally play out to a happy ending. They had, I don't know how to explain it. It's so there was this brother and a sister. They were both white. They were part of these society in this little Lovecraftian like village, and they only allowed white men and no women. So when the brother died, spoilers, the girl took his a DNA just to turn into him, and the I can't remember her name, the actress, the POC actress that was kind of like his love interest, well, her love interest, but she was a he at the time, with the DNA mixture turning her into a he. She would turn from black to white, so she will be able to work in a department store that only like hired white people, and then they brought in a black person and to mix it up because of corporate thing, but she would feel empowered whenever she turned from black to white because she felt like that she could do things more. It's a very convoluted storyline, but it's like it never got any backlash, and people want more of it because they want a season 2. And I just can't.
Why do you think it should get backlash?
Well, because compared to like other like, I don't think it should get backlash. That's the thing. I thought it was an interesting story, and I was like, wow, they're actually touching perspectives of things that you really don't see. Well, I personally don't see this stuff in movies and TV shows. And then you got like people are criticizing The Boys. I'm going to use that for example because of Storefront's ties with Nazis. But people want that show gone. But when it comes to like Lovecraft Country,
but
yeah,
the Nazis are evil.
Yeah, they are evil. I agree.
And right?
Have they ever read the comic books? I mean, when you actually look at the comic books, the Boys comic books, they, you know, in context, you know, they make all kinds of offensive stuff. I mean, that the whole comic book series is out there and offensive and violent, and you know, but when people that actually read the story, they understand why it's in there, where it comes from. But so often with TV shows, people will be on a rampage about some show they've never even watched. That's what a friend of theirs saw, and it's stupid.
Yeah, it is stupid, and they wanted to cancel The Boys over it when it's part of Storefront's character. But I don't agree with Nazis. If that
Thank you for clarifying. Just kidding.
Oh, let me tell you this. I'm reading it right now. Can you see it?
Yeah, I have the series as well.
Yeah, it's him with his not. I mean, it's part of the story.
It is part of the story.
Yeah, the Nazis are the bad guys. I mean, what can you do with that? It's like they won't even allow it into discourse as the evil part of the narrative. It's
we'll
not
have
like
to censor all the villains.
What's that?
We'll have to censor all the villains.
Yeah.
Start making TV shows that don't have villains in them.
Is it getting to that point?
It comes full circle to the Gina Carano thing.
Right? Yeah, I mean, Lord have mercy. We're in really weird times.
I'm so bad with words. I apologize. I was trying to keep it.
No, I was thinking anyone else? When you were talking about H.P. Lovecraft thing, this person changes their DNA to become a different race. I thought that would be a grounds for canceling, because you can change your gender, but there's been woke hatred of anybody who suggests that you could somehow or another change your racial identity.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Well, with that woman who was like one of those big shots in the NAACP, who claimed that she was black, but she was really white. And then somebody wrote a paper, a philosopher wrote a paper about, well, you know, if you could change your gender, why can't you change your race? You know, or you could be racial fluid, you know, like, you know, took all the things from the trans and, you know, ideology and transplanted them onto racial identity. And that person got canceled just for writing that.
Well, I mean, considering, I think I read a statistic years ago that somewhere in the neighborhood of 75% of the population of America has African-American blood in them and Native American blood in them. It's like we are, you literally are a mix of many, many, many different ethnicities, most people. So it actually, there is such a thing as, I think, racial fluidity. It really there.
Yeah.
You know? So
either that or does it even exist?
Or it doesn't. Yeah, I would say it doesn't exist. But I mean, if you're gonna categorize people like that, then and it's measurable, then you can. Then it's you know, people have so many different ethnicities churning around inside them. Why, you know, there's no reason why they can't identify as one of those.
Right. Well, then there's two different things. Like if you have an ancestry.com or whatever that other one is, and you find out what your genetic, distribution is, you've got this percentage of Dutch and, this
Yeah.
whatever. So then like you could change your identity and say, haha, that's what I really am. But then there's also like the heritage thing that your family tells you, different members of your relatives will say, well, no, you're not really Austrian, you're Polish because the Austro-Pole border and blah, blah. And so people have some room, some kind of free will when it comes to their identity already, like based on narrative things that have come to them about their identity. I mean, when I was a kid, my father was Italian, my mother's half Swedish and half Dutch. And, but my father, being a dominant, macho Italian guy, convinced me that half didn't count. I'm Italian.
Right? I
Right?
used to think I was a quarter Irish, but then my stepmother said, why do you think you're Irish? I said, well, look at Grandma Dale's hair. It's all red. She's like, she's 80 years old. Do you think that's her real hair color? You're a quarter English. Oh, okay. Well,
I really am. I am a quarter Irish.
there you go.
I just discovered that.
I heard the Irish, the people over in Ireland, they I don't know if they laugh or they don't like that all the Americans say that they're Irish, but it's true.
What does that mean if I'm a quarter Irish that I could get citizenship in Ireland?
I don't know. That's a legal thing. What's the rest of your ethnicity, Mark?
Swedish, Norwegian, Germanic, some Germanic thing, and some like Eastern European stuff thrown in there, like
Mostly
Slovak
Northern,
or something.
mostly Northern European.
Mostly Northern European, yeah. And my family didn't immigrate here till my actual father didn't come here until I think the 60s, early 1960s. He was born in Leipzig, Germany, and was forced to serve in the army during World War II at the very end. So he never fought because he was too young. But then he moved to Montreal and became a banker in Montreal and lived there for many years. And my family on my mom's side didn't come here until the 20th century, early 20th century, from Sweden by way of Canada.
We're both partly Swedish, Mark.
Well, I think the point of me saying all that is if they do decide to shackle us with reparations, I wasn't here. My family,
Right.
my whole lineage wasn't here during that time.
Likewise, yeah.
And so, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm exonerated?
Well, you might get some reparations yourself if you have Slavic ancestors, because the word slave was named
That's
after the
right.
Slavs.
That's true.
I just don't know who's going to pay, but
I think it means get your wallet out, Mark.
Yes. There's a cancelable sentiment right there. So have we exhausted the
I
topic?
think we might have. Let's see what time.
We never heard from Lou. Is she still there?
No, Lou texted me to say that something was going on at home and she had to take care of it. So
What?
And my Mark Gleason couldn't make it today because he's on a plane.
What? Where's he going?
He's going to Arizona.
Hmm.
But in the next 3 Sundays, I won't be able to do this because I'm going to be working very intensely on a project, which I'll tell you guys about when I get back.
Cool.
Okay, good. Good luck with that.
Sounds cool.
Sorry.
Well, you guys might be coming back when I probably won't be able to.
I'm
When
coming
we-
back on the 9th, May 9th.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be, my wife is coming out, I like to the 4th, so I'll probably be
Yeah,
busy for the next couple of weeks.
no problem.
Well, that was,
See who shows up.
did we get anything out of that? Or was it
It's
just all
always
hot?
good to talk about it, I mean, if nothing else, it's good to hear other people who have minds of their own, speaking freely. Speaking of free speech.
There's definitely one point in there I had a bit of an aha moment. Like that's why that thing happened.
Oh, really? What can you
I don't
remember?
know. I can't. I don't know. I'm thinking about other things now, but I'll watch the video back and then I'll remember.
Right.
It's just I was like that makes sense.
I like when Elly was talking about how she had, before had different views, and Rick, you had different views, because I think that's probably true of most people, and we kind of evolve over time, and that's fine. And I don't think we all have to agree on everything, and I think that's fine too. And I think I said this on the first podcast, but I just like I like love. I used to like be more tribalistic back in the day, and now I love talking to people where I might only agree with them on, if it's 55%. I think it's interesting talking about, as long as they're interested in talking about it. And I think there's like room. It's like I feel like a big tent of people who agree on certain fundamentals is really important. And I think I acknowledge, just like Elly did, that I didn't always used to think the same way, and we all evolve, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, Elly, just so you know, I was a registered Democrat probably until 6 years ago. I didn't vote Democrat for many years, but I never changed my registration.
Okay. Well,
and then I just went, not even independent, just declined to state, because independent party is a whole separate.
you asked me to, you remember you asked me a question on like, is it because of my family history, is it because I'm a Democrat? I can say that it's not because of the family, it's because I think it was my surroundings.
Right.
And being completely stuck in a red area, I started like thinking, oh, why do half this stuff believe is wrong to me? And so then I became a registered Democrat in 2004 when I turned 18. And after our talk, I started thinking a lot more, and I feel like I want to get out of the Democratic Party completely, but I feel like I'm stuck on something like attachment issues, I guess you want to say. I don't know how to escape from it, kind of thing.
It's like any belief system, letting it go, if it's been with you for a while, is hard. I mean, I'll tell you straight out, I think I embraced atheism only over the last 6 years. Mm-hmm. Like, it was one of the hardest things for me to let go of, for a lot of reasons. It wasn't my mind that was, per se, or my thoughts, the reason that was keeping me holding that option for God open. It was my fear, my insecurity, my and maybe the fact that belief had been embedded in me from the time I was a kid, not by my mom, but by babysitters. And I went to Sunday school when I was a kid, and babysitters took me to Sunday school, So before I could even really think or talk, I had these ideas in me, and it became a pretty intense part of my life, especially in my 20s, where I had my own moral agency, and I decided to really pursue the Christian idea, with the exception of premarital sex and all that. I did sort of what I wanted in that realm, but otherwise, I was a fairly conscientious Christian in a lot of ways. And I found a connection to it because, of my not having a father figure, not being accepted, feeling on the outside in a lot of ways. And I felt the embrace of that. And that embrace was real, it was comforting. And to give that up was very scary. And you may feel some similar kind of identity with the Democratic Party. It's the opposite of where you grew up, because you saw intolerance and closed-mindedness and superficiality, I imagine. And so you went, I think, justifiably in the opposite direction for something better, something that was more benign in your mind and more open and more inclusive. The things that the Democratic Party pretends to be. It does pretend to be that. It's just not really those things.
Right.
It tends to be those things. And now you're looking for something more authentic. You're not looking for the pose of those things. You want the real deal. I mean, the real deal's in the American Capitalist Party, I hate to tell you, but you'll find it, I think, in real liberalism when you suss that out for yourself. I mean, I think that's the I think that's the universal political goal is liberalism, political liberalism, in its true meaning of the word. And if you want to go in that direction, which means total human freedom, right? You can't do it in the Democratic Party. The Democrats recognize concrete things, and it's funny because they're a party of academics. They have a real hard time with abstract things. So like in a way, I mean, Rick, you could tell me if I'm off in this, but like they understand that as an individual, you have a right to your body because it's so clearly, yourself, you're an individual. It's at the perceptual level, but they have no idea what property means. The individual is a definite metaphysical, is metaphysically distinct from everything else around it, but property is an artifice. It's an artificial distinction that we draw in the world, and they don't know how to cope with that concept. So they haven't integrated it into their philosophy. And I've had people on the left actually discuss this with me. Like I used to be a member of HRC, the Human Rights Council or whatever, because I donated money to them because they were pro-gay marriage. And then they started coming at me and asking for donations for all kinds of hokey bullshit that I don't agree with at all. And so I sat and had a conversation with one of their callers, young girl. She must have been in her 20s, but she actually told me when I said something was a property issue, she said, no, it's a moral issue. I mean, this is different. There's property, and property is a different issue than rights. She did not make the connection at all that property is the implementation of right. You can't implement rights. You can't act on your rights without property. And to them, it's just an artifice, it's arbitrary. And so I think your idealism, provided it's tempered by reality and tempered by human nature and tempered by the desire to be free and what that means to be free, is going to lead you in the right direction. The Democratic Party is a necessary phase, just like coming out of the Democratic Party for me. To get where I am as a full liberal, I actually had to go through a spate of conservatism, because conservatives in the 90s were a little bit more coherent philosophically speaking, and they were terrible on social issues pretty much always, but they had one foot on the ground with respect to economics and the way the world worked. And so I sort of had to go through that stage where I became a conservative apologist in many respects, until I was able to see where they failed. And that was in large part due to my mentor, who was a conservative and sort of took me out of my comfort zone. And I started wrestling with ideas. But, you're in a transition phase. You're spiritually, I think, done with the Democratic Party. I think you see how corrupt and vile it is. It's corrupt and vile like the Republicans are.
Did you lose a lot of friends in the process? Because no.
No, Republicans, look, I got to be honest with you. My experience is the conservatives in Hollywood are more accepting. I'm not saying that conservatives everywhere are that way, because there's fringy jerk-offs everywhere, but they're definitely more accepting of your variance, your political variance, than the left is. In part because in Hollywood, they have to be the minority, and so they're tolerant. But the left is extremely intolerant. And, part of the intolerance is something that I sort of admire in a weird way, because it's moral purity. They're really going for what they think is good, and they're not afraid to make politics a moral venture. And that's exactly what it is. That's where the libertarians and the Republicans go off, because they think it's not a moral venture, or they try to make it merely a practical venture. And that's why they lose all the time. So yeah, you'll lose friends because they take their politics seriously. It's at the moral level that they'll take it seriously. I take it seriously too, but I don't necessarily disown people for it unless they're way off. But I will, there will be a point at which my my social ethics is so different that I can't stand to really operate in the same sphere as that person, right? I just had a big blowout with somebody recently who virtue signaled this big long diatribe about how this country was made for white people, and I just butchered him on Facebook, and he got so mad. And he was a former student of mine, and he's like, "Yeah, I know you wouldn't say this stuff to me in person." I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me? What? Of course I will. You're calling me a Nazi. I'm saying you're stupid. I mean, who deserves to get punched in the throat, me or you?" But then he wouldn't let me respond. He just spazzed out and ran, like they all do. But he's definitely, there's no way we could be in the same corner together. I think he does it for attention and to be included, like a lot of these people do in this community of wokeness. And so he doesn't have the balls. He doesn't have balls, but he's got enough of a moral sense that he takes it seriously, and I take it seriously, that we probably can't be in the same space together without something bad happening. So,
yeah.
What's that?
No, Elly, once your friends decide that you're wearing a black hat and they're wearing the white hats, you might lose a few of them.
Okay. No, the reason I asked that, because I've been friends with them for like 15 years, and a lot of them do not share the same views as me. And it's a hard road also, because I'm like, I don't want to lose my best friend. And if we have different political differences and they don't want to talk to me anymore, it's like, can you really help that? And I'd have to take y'all's advice on it too, because then you got to realize where your true friends are too at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I
think that when someone's really your friend, that they'll look at your friendship and the things that you experience together, and that should be more important than like what political. I was on a political thread one time and talking to this guy, I've had good experiences with him in the past. He's, and somebody else jumped in and they were like, "Don't talk to this guy. He's a racist. Go through his tweets and you'll see what a racist he is." And it's like, first off, I don't care. That's his business. I'm not going to dig through someone's tweets trying to prove what a bad person. I'm like, I'm perfectly capable of going through my life, just avoiding things I don't like and avoiding people I don't like. I don't need to, go digging through someone's history. And I really wish people had more of the ability just to mind their own business about things. People seem to have kind of lost that ability in all the cancel culture and mobs, and you should never talk to this person or associate with that person, and I think all that's just really stupid.
Well, I mean, look, I don't think it's stupid to want to associate with a racist. I think that's actually not stupid at all. The problem,
but what goes for racism nowadays is usually not a racist.
Right. The problem is they're applying
people
that
just
term.
Throw that term around everywhere.
They're applying the term to anybody who doesn't agree with their notion of the way the world is or the way people interrelate with each other, and that's what's fucked up. Yeah,
it's like I'm not Nancy Drew. I'm not going to investigate every person I talk to. I mean, I tend to just live in my own little sphere and not bother with people.
I mean, if a friend told me that somebody I was associating with was a racist, I would check it out, to be honest with you, and make up my own mind, since the word has no meaning anymore. But I certainly wouldn't want to be with a racist. I have associates, some of whom grew up in one of my former guitar teacher grew up in the hood in Detroit, and sometimes he says really awful shit, and I'm like, dude, don't say that to me. Don't talk that way. I can't stand it. Don't use that word. Don't talk to me in that way. I had one of my cousins, a Pellegrino, once said on my Facebook or on my Twitter that Obama needed it was like an Oswald haircut or something. He was implying he needed to be assassinated. And this was during the Obama administration. I'm like, I said, you know what? Don't ever say that on my fucking feed again. It's a federal crime. And no, he doesn't need to be assassinated, you stupid fuck. Just because you have a political difference with him, don't ever say that again, or I will cancel you from my life. Because it was clear that it came from a sort of a racist, he was coming from a racist perspective. So yeah, those people are worth canceling.
Agreed.
They're worth canceling. But, just make sure that the terms are straight.
Well,
Yeah,
what red
for sure.
pilled me was on my campus, a couple of my woke colleagues who I've been friends with for many years were starting an informal whispering campaign to get a conservative guy who taught in a business class to get him fired. And I was like, but don't you know what a racist he is? He's a misogynist, he's a homophobe, he's an Islamophobe. And I was like, he is? Where'd you get that idea? Have you ever seen his Facebook wall? And I said, okay, when I asked for the evidence, and what I was shown was he had something on there about Trump. So he liked Trump. That automatically made him guilty of all of those things.
Yeah.
And the other solid piece of evidence was, these Willy Wonka memes where somebody says one thing and then Willy Wonka says the funny response to it. So
Yeah.
on the top half of the meme, there was a woman in a burqa saying something critical about the United States. And then Willy Wonka said something like, isn't that funny coming from somebody from a country where, women can't even whatever. I think it was something like that. That was proof that he was Islamophobic. And I thought, and they literally tried to get him fired. That was when I started arguing with them and saying, what's wrong with you people? Like, I at the time, in fact, I was really upset that Trump won the election, but because I didn't vote for him. But I remember saying things like, well, I know lots of people who are really rational, intelligent people who voted for him for a bunch of what they thought were good reasons. They wanted this, they wanted jobs, the economy, the border, whatever. And that doesn't make them racist, but arguing with those people, oh yeah, if you're against borders, you're against Mexicans. So you must be a racist. There's just no reasoning with people. That was my red pill moment, dealing with this fake use of the word racism and all the other isms. They were all just, if you are not woke, you're all those evil things.
Yeah, it's just
unfortunately-
buzzwords. It's just buzzwords. If they don't like you, you're this, you're that. I've seen that so much. I'm like, I don't buy into any of that. It's like the term limited edition or something, or collector's item. It's just, it's so overused. Like you're like, I don't even, pay no attention to it anymore.
I did some research before we started here. I just went into the trending things on Twitter. I typed in free speech, and the top one is Sharon Osbourne at the moment. There's a front page article where she's saying, what the hell was it? It was, I know what my faults are and I'm not racist. It's like, and she's there looking really glamorous saying this stuff. I kind of want to read it actually now. I think it worked on me, but it's such a template.
I remember when Eddie Izzard came out as being a trans woman, and the picture of them came out on the front page as, I'm coming out as a trans woman. And on the exact same page, there was a picture, I think, of women who had been murdered or something. And people were actually going after them saying, oh, you want to be a woman, but look what's happening to real women and stuff. I'm like, they didn't design the front page of the newspaper. I mean, just, anything sets people off nowadays, and I have to hope that eventually things become so loony and out of control and extreme that maybe they'll circle back around to being conservative or something, because it just come, full circle. I hope.
Well, Mark, you recently, just a few days ago, posted something about, are there any real Marxists? And I posted back, I think, the link to the recent Dave Rubin episode where...
Oh, honest Marxists.
Honest Marxists, where Dave Rubin was talking about Patrice, I forget her last name, one of the co-founders of BLM, who just bought her 5th house. She's got like $5 million worth of houses. She's an avowed Marxist. And somebody gave you and me a hard time on that thread.
That was Cubby.
Yeah, that
Cubby,
was
right.
Cubby.
Yeah,
Right,
it's
saying,
like,
oh, well, the Black community is mourning the death of a 13-year-old, and you're criticizing Patrice. And I was like, excuse me, that guilt trip thing doesn't work with me. Sorry.
Yeah.
I hate that shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they try to do that to establish their own moral superiority over you and dominate the conversation. I don't know. I thought she was chastened by that conversation. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
That's why I say she's closed-minded. So
Well, she certainly is. If she buys the theory, I mean, but she gets something out of believing this stuff. She gets something out of it. She gets a certain sense of dominance and control and moral superiority. And because lots of people out there don't know how to respond to those kinds of quips where they conflate you with, being insensitive or immoral, and they cow to it. She's found a weapon that works with lots of people, even educated people. Luckily on our feed, it doesn't go very far.
Yeah. Educated people, unfortunately, are incredibly susceptible to that nonsense.
well, they'll block you too if you don't agree with them.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm blocked by everyone now. It's got really boring for me.
Mark's feed is nothing but unable to view this tweet.
yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Who is the
Yeah.
unable to view this tweet person?
I have
There's
to
not a
open
ton of things.
incognito
Yeah.
mode to see what the hell is going on, because all I'm reading is like a one-sided conversation. Like
Don't
Mark's
read it.
talking to himself.
Yeah, and then
Does you a
they
favor.
delete permanently their crappy responses and what they do to instigate, arguments with me. I mean, I can't even imagine that kind of person, right? Who fakes realities to such a degree. I don't know what they're getting out of that. Other than, what are they getting out of that? I mean, they're literally
Well,
faking reality. They have to eliminate their responses to me, eliminate what got me into the conversation in the first place, in order to paint me as a certain, in a certain light. And there's been times when they've tweeted these things back at me. You said this 5 years ago. I look at it, I'm like, it's pretty cool. That's pretty smart. I
it's
can't believe
because-
I was that smart 5 years ago.
Retweet it.
It's because that you're a celebrity with a verified check mark. People hold you to a higher standard than they should. I'm like, why can't you just let him be himself? It's like, who
Higher
cares?
standard?
Well, yeah.
So
Yeah,
but it's a
they put
standard
you-
they don't keep up
yeah.
themselves.
No, they don't. And it's hypocritical. And I call them hypocrites. I'm like, he's still a
They
person.
are.
Well, I
Oh,
think
might
too, the more people see something, the more potential that they'll jump on it and get offended by it. Like if I tweet something, 10 people see it. If Mark tweets something, a whole bunch of people see it. And it's easier to get people to be mad at a celebrity and stuff. And they just, pop out of the woodwork to scream about things and then vanish and then pop out of the woodwork again.
The motive is,
You know
the
what,
motive is,
yeah,
if I could
think
take, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ellie.
I don't know. It's just like for a long time, I've been thinking that they actually need Mark. They actually need his platform to get their own ideas to be bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I was just about to say. If not only that, but if somebody can take a shot at somebody like Mark Pellegrino, it's like, oh, you know what? I got a good shot in on the fastest gun in the West. I shot him in the leg or whatever. Like they get some kind of street cred for that on Twitter.
It's
I got
so
a good one in.
stupid. He's
It
just
all
still
comes
a
up to
person.
power, basically.
Yeah, that's why I say higher standard, because they forget he's still a person. Because at the end of the day, we're all people and should be treated
Yeah.
with respect. That includes people with verified check marks, because they're still, like I said, a human being that deserves
it's like-
respect.
It's so interesting how I think, and not just in this situation, but in the wider world, it's always about good guys and bad guys, right? So it's like, you're good because you're not racist, you're bad because you don't believe in this stuff or whatever. It's always about like assigning
The white hats and
the
black
moral high
hats.
ground.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, like
And-
Rick said, the white hats and the black hats.
Yeah, right. And they are so incredibly sensitive to it that I find it really interesting. Like if I insinuate you're actually the bad guy, they freak out. It's like the biggest trigger of all to say, well, actually, you did something here that wasn't great. you're not living by your own standards, you're answerable. And they're like, that's
Yeah,
not
they have a hard time figuring out they're wrong.
One of
yeah,
the
but
first
that's
things
to me,
I
that's the
do.
crux of it all, really. It's like that self-image of being, it's virtue signaling, right? I'm attacking the virtue signaling by doing that. It's
Yeah.
just-
I mean, yeah, trolls tend to have that almost that abusive mentality of, you know, they only act aggressive because you made them do it. Or it was, you know, almost like it was self-defense. And, you know, that's how they can go onto threads, act mean, nasty, and hateful. And when anybody tries to defend themselves, they're like, oh, you're picking on me. You know, I think that's where a lot of it comes. It would almost be like if you're just out and about and someone comes up and hits you in the head with a stick and you try to, you know, punch them or smack them, well, you're bullying them. I mean, but in online, such outrageous behavior is a lot easier to overlook or misconstrue or whatever than it would be if it was in real life.
That's true.
Yep.
Rick, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, whenever anybody accuses me online of being part of this white supremacist society and all that, I just call them a racist. I say, oh, that's a racist remark. Instead of defending the country or its history, or no, like, you're not going to put me on the defense. You just attacked me from racist grounds, and I'm going to expose you. You just made a racist remark. And I think everybody should do that. When anybody,
I do that. I do that.
ideology, when anybody tries to put you in an ugly light using woke ideology, you need to identify that they've just attacked you on bad moral grounds, that they have no right. They identified you on the basis of some arbitrary characteristic like your skin color or your gender or whatever the hell it is. And you have to identify that they are a bigot.
Well, that's just like, I mean, I used to live in Georgia. I mean, like Whitfield County, Georgia. So I know racism when I see it because some of them, they're diehard racists over there. So when I see people complaining about petty stuff online, you're raising like, dude, you should go to Georgia, Whitfield County, you know, the flea market down there. There's some, you know. So I just think sometimes people want to nitpick about stuff instead of looking at the bigger issues of things.
We have to understand that they're not using the term in the same way that
Yeah.
it was used
They
5
have-
years ago. So it's really talking at cross purposes. You're talking past each other. And I don't know that many of them really understand like that they're doing that. Like, you know, obviously the academics who are kind of pushing this ideology downward understand, you know, what they're doing and what they mean. But it's really, I think when they're using race, you could just substitute ideology and then you get a pretty good approximation of what they're meaning.
Yep, I agree. Well, I think we've
Fair.
solved all of the world's problems in 2.5 hours.
Yes, for today.
If we could just snap our fingers, would be easier.
Yeah. Wave a magic wand.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Well, we've been 2.5 hours. I think we should probably call it quits for the day.
Yep.
I'll see you
All right.
guys back here in a month.
All right, guys.
All right.
That's good.
Rick,
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
showing up,
Take care,
folks.
everybody.
Peace.
Take care.
Bye.
Peace. Bye.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye.
Be
Bye.
well. Ciao.